don't think that the only way you win is by getting signed and playing in front of 10,000 people, because that's not how the Browning has gotten to where it is. The Browning's gotten to where it is because we played a freaking 1,000 shows to 10 people in rooms. Lived in a van for a decade. Like we won by that.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is bringing three of my favorite things together: electronic music, heavy metal, and podcasting. He produces and sings for not one, but two different electronic core bands, The Browning and Death and Destiny. And he also hosts a podcast called Burn This World, where he interviews artists and industry players from the heavy metal scene. This is Johnny McBee.
How you doing?
What's up, man? I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm perfect. That's probably the best intro I've ever had, honestly.
Yo, let's go. Thank you, man. I appreciate that. I'm getting better at these.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really cool to be talking to another podcaster, a fellow podcaster. This is going to be fun.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the realm of like music podcasts, I feel, is very limited to a specific style of that's like what's really popular. And so it's important for people like us that are in seemingly more underground scenes and work directly with up and coming artists rather than just trying to talk to big names,
Yeah,
I'll talk to someone that has 500 monthly listeners on Spotify. I don't care,
That's sick. Yeah, I love that, man. I love that. Well, it's really cool how we connected. I recently did an episode with Swarm.
Yep.
Who he was somebody that I just found him online and I didn't even know him. I just reached out. I was like, yo, dude, I think what you're doing is cool. Definitely a great episode for everybody to go out there and check out. But you saw that episode come out and then you hit me up, which normally I don't usually take sort of like solicitations. I'm like, if I don't really know you and you want to come on, I'm like, we'll see about that. But I went to your page, I checked it out. I was like, this guy's in a fucking metal band making really sick music. I'm a fan. I dug into the music. I saw you fucking screaming and rocking out on your page. And then I also saw that you basically have the heavy metal version of the Headliner Mindset Podcast. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a green flag. This guy's getting on the show.
Heck
Let's
yeah.
dive in and have some fun.
Heck yeah. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm glad that you reached out. I'd love to hear about the band. And I know you have two, but let's start with the Browning. Tell me about this band, because this is actually the first time I had seen the term electronic core.
Uh-huh.
I'm a metalcore fan, like specifically within the umbrella term of heavy metal. I specifically really like what we call metalcore. The As They Lay Dyings, the Kill Switch Engage. Ice Nine Kills is like my favorite band right now. But I've never seen the term electronic core. So tell me about what that is in this cool lane that you guys are operating in.
So like, especially in the modern world, there's not many bands that are doing like what would be deemed like true electronic core in that sense. And the term electronic core is basically just any metal that incorporates a mass amount of electronic music influences. Like for me, whenever I started the Browning, I've been doing it since 2005 or so, when I was like 14, and just uploading music onto MySpace. I was super into DDR, which got me into like hardstyle, like European hardstyle music. Yeah. And my thought was to combine because at the same time I listened to Hatebreed and As They Lay Dying and Amon Amarth. And so my thought was to combine the heaviest metal with the heaviest electronic music, because listening to hardstyle, it's just so driving and the melodies are super dark. And I just wanted to take that and combine it with metal. So I wanted to take the best aspects of both music, put it into one package, and basically be my goal at the time, and still is, to be like the most electronic, like heavy band. So there's typically not 1 second of the music that doesn't have electronics. There's something happening, whether it's a rhythmic, synth, or it's like an actual big synth or choirs or whatever. So the goal is to be the heaviest band using electronics like 100% of the time. And so I've kind of stuck true to that. There's been plenty of times that managers or whoever wanted to do like, a rock song or, whatever, trying to want to give some sort of attempt at, a mainstream sound. But for me, the point of the Browning's music is to be that sound and see how far it can go. And, started it as a full band in 2010 because it was just a solo project of mine in MySpace up until that point. And immediately was getting attention from some industry people just as far as we got signed almost immediately, picked up managers and booking agents, and so it was clearly attention grabbing just because at that time in metalcore, if someone was combining electronic elements into the metal, it was more like, here's the metal part, here's the electronic part, you know?
Yeah.
So it would randomly stop and go into a big trance build into, whatever sort of electronic part they want to do, but it wasn't like melded together in a
Yeah.
proper way.
Yeah.
The more aggressive music at that time that really properly melded it together was more on the industrial side, which isn't as accessible to a lot of people.
Yep.
And
Totally.
so the Browning, I feel, was one of the bands that really combined it to where the synths and the electronics was actually the focus rather than the metal side. And even going back early, like, I look back at it now and I can kind of understand how it took so long for the Browning to get like to where the Browning is now, because especially early on, the point of my music was so much focus on the electronics that I put guitars below it, I put vocals below it, like it was
Mhm.
on top of the mix, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've gotten
Yeah.
a lot better at combining it together.
Well, dude, I think you've knocked it out of the park because as somebody who can be found in the middle of a mosh pit as well as in the middle of the rave,
Yep,
like I equally love both worlds so much. And I know that there is a whole demographic of other people like you and I that are out there. They are the fans of the Browning, but I also just haven't really seen anyone that's brought it together that well. For me, my kind of gateway drug into electronic music actually was trance, and I could just because I loved the melodic structure. I came from listening to like European death metal, like Children of Bodom and In Flames and stuff, and it just translated into trance music with Armin van Buren and all these guys that are like making very cool melodic orchestral type of stuff. And a lot of people were like, "Yo, Nick, well, you're a metalhead. Why don't you like dubstep? It's pretty much like it's like heavy metal but electronic music." And I was like, "No, it's actually really not. Like it
yeah,
just never I didn't like it. It was just noisy. It wasn't really melodic. To me
yep,
it wasn't very like it was just very sound design and noisy and bassy."
for sure.
But I'm like that's not what heavy metal is. Heavy metal is actually very intelligent. It's very intelligent. It's very musical and melodic. And so I think that there's obviously been a really cool thing happening with the world of bass music, like the heavier dubstep sounds are merging, where we're seeing a lot of collaborations with actual metal bands and actual big bass music artists. I think it's pretty cool. I think it's getting there, but I also still just like it's the same thing where it's like, okay, here's the dubstep part and then
Yep,
here's the metal part. But those
exactly.
pieces aren't really living together and no one's really nailed it. But what you guys are doing, I think is like that's the pocket, man. You guys are doing it really well.
I was the same thing about dubstep in its heyday. I was not a fan because it was just, chaos and noise. Like exactly what you're saying is my same exact thoughts, which there was some melodic aspects to it, but it wasn't the sort of melodics that I personally liked a lot. Like I like a really singable, like simple melody. Like for me, really hardstyle, like from back in that era, like 2009 hardstyle and earlier was the big part of me. And I also am the same way. I lean a lot more towards European metal, which what you said, the Europeans, and I've said this a million times on my podcast, each region like is specifically good at certain things, and Europeans are specifically good at melody, and they just really are. And that like musical melody, not even necessarily voice melody. I feel like American bands put a lot more focus on like the vocal melodies where the music is more background, where Europeans put more of a focus on instrumental melody rather than vocal melody. And so that is my melodic influence comes not only from like European hardstyle, but also European metal, pretty much like
Yeah.
solely.
How do you feel about drum and bass? Because that's been one of my genres that I've been over this last year really getting into a lot more. Because I
Yeah.
think I really discovered Pendulum, and they were like the closest thing where I was like, they're obviously much more electronic, but it's like they got a really cool rock vibe, not
Right.
necessarily metal, but I'm like, this is like an electronic rock band.
Yeah.
And so I've been really digging into the drum and bass world, and I feel like that's a fun spot where I'm seeing more of it blended together in a way that actually really works.
Yeah, so drum and bass is the for this album is one that I'm much more specifically focusing on, of implementing certain elements. I've done this over the course of the years with different electronic genres, whether it be synthwave or hardstyle or some dubstep elements. I basically take like my favorite parts of every sound and implement just like parts of it. You know, like I said, I don't have a full hardstyle song. I don't have full synthwave songs, but I definitely have like certain elements of it. And for me, drum and bass, it's specifically those drums, the really upbeat, fast. You know, it adds a lot of momentum. It was the same reason that I just automatically knew that hardstyle and metal could blend together because the
Yeah.
energy and how driving it is.
Yeah.
It's same thing with drum and bass. Those drums
Totally.
are just have so much movement in them, that it gets you moving no matter what. And so that's
Yeah.
the for this newest stuff I'm writing, that is actually a big focus is implementing those things.
Cool. Yeah, dude. Have you heard the Bullet for My Valentine and Pendulum collab that they put
I
out?
didn't.
I'll send it to you after this. There's some cool shit happening out there. So
It's funny that
definitely send that over.
Bullet's been doing some stuff like that, but whenever Bring Me the Horizon freaking blew up from Sepaternal, Bullet had a famous interview where the singer said, "Oh, we would never replace our guitars with synthesizers," you know, where and now they've been a lot of their new music has synths. It's just the way of the modern world. They just have like how many songs can you write with guitar, drums, vocals, and bass, you
Yeah.
know? The synths are endless possibilities.
And here's a cool thing I haven't thought of before, but even if we think about pop radio, right? Like my background is I started my career at Capitol Records, and I was
Yeah.
there right when we signed David Guetta from Europe, who at the
Okay.
time was just this weird French house producer, right? But what he did was he brought, and I credit him for doing it, but he brought the four on the floor synth house beats into pop radio because he
Right.
started collaborating. He wrote he produced I Got a Feeling for the Black Eyed Peas. He started bringing these sounds into the mainstream. And so our ears have actually since then become very attuned to electronic music being in everything. So metal and rock is one of the last, maybe genres or maybe the country music or something, right? But it's like if we're still only relying on these four sounds, it's almost like there's this natural evolution happening where all music is being supported by a foundational bed of electronic music. So it kind of makes sense that rock and heavy metal are going to also start to be more supported in that because that's just what our ears are used to now. It's a
Yeah.
bigger, fuller sound.
Yeah, I mean, there's just you can't really, you can't really compete as far as modern production goes with just like bass instruments. Like, so I don't know, just even country now is doing the like kind of rap beats or hip hop beats behind some of their
Yeah.
stuff, and so they're adding
Yeah.
electronic drums into country music now quite often
Yeah.
too. So it's just the
Yeah.
way everything needs to evolve, and especially as everyone has such easy access to production tools, it's just I don't know, I just see it as definitely the way of the future, and there's, more and more metal bands that are picking up electronic elements, probably the biggest band right now that's bringing electronic rock and metal to the mainstream would be Motionless in White.
Yeah.
They are probably the nearest band to the Browning, but the Browning just takes that sound to an extreme where they have a lot of, more kinda radio potential songs, you know?
Yeah, they got those catchy pop
Mhm.
vocals, like,
Yeah, for sure.
those guys are amazing, and didn't you interview, I think, the guitar player,
Yeah.
fairly recently? Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
so cool, man. You're getting access to some pretty badass artists on your podcast, and I do wanna talk about that, in a little bit, but I'd love to still hear a little bit more about the Browning. So
Yeah.
you're working on a new album now, and you've put out some pretty amazing music already. I've saw that you got over 5 million plays on some songs,
Mm.
11 million plays on some songs. So you've been crushing the Spotify game.
Yeah.
And I love like one, we're talking about this like cross pollination of genres as I think is just rad. Electronic music and heavy metal. We've also got, the hip hop and the country worlds coming together. It's so rad. There's obviously a market for what you're doing. I'm really curious about how you've been reaching that market, and specifically, how have you been getting those numbers so high on Spotify?
So one thing dealing with Spotify numbers and kind of analyzing them in specific ways, the Browning has definitely been a long haul play. It hasn't been like this random hype moment that just like bursts into popularity. And so one thing I noticed when going through like end of the year stats and all these other artists are posting their end of the year stats, there will be artists that have a lot more overall listeners than us, but less streams than us. And so what that means is that there's fewer amount of people listening to the Browning, but those people are listening way more than
Mm,
what the pop in, listen, dip out type listeners might be. And
yeah.
so for the Browning, we really built and we're still growing. Like the last album that we did, our numbers almost doubled, and then we just dropped a new song that is by far the most reach that we've had from anything that we've done. And I would say one thing is that we've built this hardcore dedicated base of people that like our music. If you want to listen to something that sounds like the Browning, you have to listen to the Browning. And those people hear that sound, nothing else can really replace it to them. And so they're always coming back. And so for me, anytime I'm talking to someone that wants to build something like that, you have to figure out why would someone listen to you rather than listen to the bigger artist that sounds the same? Because people are going to gravitate towards what's more popular if there's a more popular option for what you do. Like if someone's making deathcore music that sounds exactly like Whitechapel, people are just going to go listen to Whitechapel. They're not going to listen to your band. And
Great
so
point.
you have to make something that can't be listened to or consumed elsewhere. And so our numbers have just progressively grown because we have this base of people that only like straight up some people only listen to the Browning, and then just over time gradually getting more and more people. And one thing for me that I kind of had to not necessarily accept, but realize, and I mentioned a little bit before that listening back to my older stuff, I could understand how some people might be turned off by the way that the Browning sounded with how highly the synths were prioritized in the mix, to where I kind of dialed it back to some degree to make it more listen like I knew that Browning fans would like it no matter what, but to reach new people, I had to kind of put the focus on making those synths done in a way that's a little more listenable to people that don't particularly like it. I mean,
Mm,
we're trying to half appeal to people that are just have this wide range of listening that they like to do, and then half appeal to people that listen to the heaviest music that actually like despise electronic music, you know? So
yeah,
we have some people
yeah.
that are like, I hate synthesizers, I hate EDM, but I love what the Browning's doing, you know?
You got him.
Yeah,
Got
exactly.
got you, suckers.
And so with the last album, the one before I'm doing now, I had the electronics are still 100% of the time. They're still the big synths and the moments, but a lot of the synths have turned into more stuff that serves like more of a purpose in the song rather than being like the focus. So I'll have a going with like some, so rhythmatic purposes at times or background elements that create like an atmosphere at a lot of times, and not just these big going the whole time. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so basically dial it back in a way so that it's not too unlistenable for someone that doesn't like that stuff, but it's tasteful enough that it's still in there a lot. And so
Mm.
basically create a sound that nobody else is doing, that people have to listen to you, and then figure out how to do something that's creative but not completely off-putting.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's a really, it reminds me of, there's this book I was just talking about yesterday with somebody called The Blue Ocean Strategy, the very famous marketing book. And the whole idea is that, when sharks are in the water, and if one of them finds a seal or a dolphin and finds some prey and it chomps down on it, all of a sudden the water becomes red. And then what happens is all the other sharks swim over there. They're like, oh, there's some meat over here. Let's go try to get a piece of that. And that's what so many artists are doing, is like, whoa, this is what's popular, this is what's happening, this is what's successful, let's go over there because that's where all the action is. And this whole book is about a bunch of case studies of companies that have basically done the blue ocean strategy, which is like there's a blue ocean over here. There's nobody over there. There's nothing over here. We don't even know if there's any fucking food over here, but we're going to go explore that. And that's about creating your own lane. And so I really love, one, hearing that this is about the long run. This is about the long haul. This isn't some quick flash in the pan thing that just popped off. You've been meticulously working at this for years. You've also been, one, combining your passions and like what you like and what you love, but also at the same time finding that balance of kind of tweaking and tuning to what's working and what is digestible while still staying authentic to the core essence of what you're really all about.
For sure. Yeah. And it's always kind of been my theory of just sticking to the guns. If I wanted to create a sound that sounded different from the Browning, I would just create another project. I don't want to sacrifice what the Browning is for some attempt at appeal. And the thing with the shark that chomps on the seal and then all the other sharks go there, by the time all those other sharks get there, that seal's gone. And
Yep.
so if you're following a trend, that means you're too late. You have to try to attempt to make the trend yourself.
Yes, sir. I love it, man. Very aligned on that idea. And so you also have another project as well called Death and Destiny.
Yeah.
Right. And is that, from what I gathered on Instagram, is that with your wife?
Yeah.
That you do that with? That's amazing. Tell me about this project.
Yeah. So, like you said, I've been doing the Browning for a long time, and it's been something I've really grinded at and really thought about meticulously. And through that, probably overthinking and being your worst critic, I've understand like why the Browning didn't have like a faster rise to where it could be. And there's a few things that are wrong with the Browning in a certain like branding sense. So one, the name is weird. Whenever right, the name is just straight up weird.
Okay, where did the name come from? What's the origin behind the Browning?
Again, I was 14 when I made this, and so it was
Yeah.
just the name of the road that my high school was on.
Okay.
That's it. It was just Browning Road.
Got
And
it.
so means nothing. And for some reason, my 14-year-old brain didn't go to thinking about poop when I hear the word brown, apparently like everybody else in the world. And so whenever I was making it a full band, it was a discussion with the guys because I already had all music done and I brought people in and, said, this is the music we're going to play. And, we had a discussion. Should we name it something else? But I already had a little following on MySpace. And then also the only names were coming up with was like stereotypical metal crap for the time,
Yeah,
you know? And so I was like, but how can I put out this music that's super weird and have a stereotypical name? And so my thought is whether people like the name The Browning or not, they're going to remember it. And there are much dumber names out there that have became successful. Limp Bizkit, Korn. At some point, the name doesn't matter. So just as far as branding issues, the name is weird. And in the metal world, even if you're bigger than a band, if some band has some cool branding, they don't want to play underneath a band with a dumb name. There's just how it is. And then two, the Browning never had like a specific image. So we play this super weird music that's very unique and electronic, kind of futuristic. But if you look at us before and even now, if you just saw us, you would think we were a death metal band, straight up. So there's a disconnect between name and image, and then also name and sound, because the name so some people can be seen as like a silly name, but it's very serious music, like the topic matter, super serious.
Yeah.
So there's just some elements to the Browning that have been branded wrong, and that just goes to being young, just doing it, and then, sticking to it. And so
let me ask you this real quick. When you say the image, are you talking about the image of the band members or just the brand in general?
No, the image of the band members.
Okay. Because I just got to say, the brand itself is sick as fuck. Like,
Right.
That's the other part I want to talk to you about. Because just like you found a really great designer, you've got some really cool artwork, and so I just wanted to clarify that, and we'll talk about that in a moment.
Yeah, for sure. It's more so what we look like if we're on stage or in videos. We look like a death metal band, but have this electronic futuristic sound.
Yeah.
Which is something that could be changed at some point. But basically, where I got into this other project is also one other aspect to the Browning that not necessarily had a disconnect, but was something that could be done in a more focused manner, was the Browning would have these super chaotic, heavy songs that genre jump between all of them. Like if you listen to our most popular song, Carnage, it goes from metalcore to a hardstyle part to a trap part back into, fast double bass. Like this stuff is all over the place at times. And then there's another side of the Browning that gets to my more EDM side that is just big anthemic, like synthesizers, this big, like kind of anthemic rock sound that I would always have females feature on because personally, especially probably coming from the DDR realm was my big influence. I just love female vocals, like ambient female vocals are my favorite thing. So I had two sides, super heavy, chaotic, all over the place, and then really anthemic synth rock. And our second most popular song is called Skybreaker, and that is one of those songs. It's a straight up, like, kind of synthwave influenced big synth rock song. And so that song got so big, it just started gaining fans specifically for that sound. People were fans of the Browning because of the song Skybreaker. But if they went and listened to 80% of the rest of the catalog, that sound did not exist, you know?
Yeah.
And so there was a bit of disconnect in that as well, where the music was a little too unfocused. And so my thought was, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that specific sound that blew up with Skybreaker and make a new project that is using that sound specifically and then is branded really nice, good name, good branding, good image, everything completely in line. So if you see the pictures of the band, you can assume what it's going to sound like. The name is kind of modern and dark, but also can be used in a lot of different ways as well. So basically everything completely in line, and just and then it allows me to put out a lot more music where, again, I've said I don't ever want to sacrifice what the Browning's point is, which would be super heavy, the heaviest band with electronics. I don't have to sacrifice that now because I have this other rock, like anthemic synth rock side with Death X Destiny. And then I have the Browning to be the heavy side. So it allows me to focus both and put out double the music.
This is a really interesting point to explore because, a lot of my audience are music producers, specifically electronic music producers and DJs. And we really operate in a singles driven world where it's like you just put out one track at a time. You're not spending a year making an album and dropping 10 songs usually, right? And so it's almost like there is a little bit more wiggle room with like, okay, for this song, I can do this style. And then maybe the next song I can do a little bit of a different style. And I think this is a question that a lot of artists have is how much can I stretch myself stylistically? A lot of times we have a lot of different influences and we want to go in different directions, but there also really is something to be said about having consistency with your sound, especially with your brand. And so that's almost like this $1 million question of like, should I put out multiple genres under the same roof, or should I start a different project for these other sounds? And I will say, I could probably list 25 different artists right now that I know that are massive, that are killing it, that the current project that is successful started off as like a side project from what they were doing. They were working on something for years and years. And then they were like, you know what, I'm going to try this other thing. And it's just for fun, just something I'm going to make on the side. And then that shit pops off.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
yeah. And so with this, I'm, some of my influence on this has come from the dude that owns the record label that I'm now signed to, which is called Fixed. And the guy that owns it and started it, his name is Celldweller. He is a legend in electronic rock and metal. He has like 7 projects that he writes full time with.
Wow.
And they're all solo projects. And I don't know if it's 5, I don't know if it's 7, whatever it is, it's crazy. And so basically what he does, he was in the same boat where he had his main project, Celldweller, and he was kind of all over the place because, as all of us are, sometimes we want to write something soft, sometimes we want to write something ridiculous. But what he did instead then is he sat down at his computer and he would just start writing. And whatever came out that day, one of his projects would fill that void. It would go towards one of those projects.
Yeah.
And so he would sit down and write and said, okay, this one sounds like a Celldweller song, or sit down and be writing is like, okay, this one's kind of feeling like it's turning into a Scandroid song. And so
Yeah.
he sends that song to whichever his projects it's fitting for. And the one of my old managers, I asked him, what is my best way that I can make the most money possible? Like straight up as a musician, what's my option? Like at that time, I was curious, like, do I need to start managing bands? Do I need to work for a label? Like, what do I need to do to be able to make, I had a kid and everything. And so like, what do I need to do? He said,
Yeah.
put out as much music as you physically can. That was
Mm,
his answer.
cool.
And the thing is, so right now my rollout plan with DXD, and this is one reason it's probably good to have multiple projects with the singles like being so prevalent. Like you want to be able to have those singles, be able to pitch them to Spotify playlists, and you can only do that every so often, and it has to be a single pretty much to be pitched to Spotify.
Yeah.
And so essentially, if I had half this music, or if I had one project of Browning, I would every 6 weeks I could pitch one song to playlisting.
Mm,
Whereas now I have 2 projects every 6 weeks for each project I can pitch to playlisting. So
yeah.
basically what we're doing is Browning song comes out and you have 6 weeks until the next Browning song, but in the middle of that is a Death and Destiny song. And
Yeah.
so it's basically rotating Browning, Death and Destiny, Browning, Death and Destiny. So at all times, I'm in rotation of being pitched to Spotify playlisting. Yeah, where if you just have one project, you have one opportunity every 6 weeks to pitch.
Yeah.
Where
For
now I
sure.
have two, and then I
For
could have
sure.
three. Like so,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you mentioned making money. How are you making money as an independent artist right now? Where are you seeing money come from?
I mean, streams is important, but definitely monetizing in like more unique ways. Like I've built a community. I wrote the past 3 Browning albums live on Twitch. Like I live streamed the whole writing process and everything, which
Sick.
kind of there's a lot of benefits to that I've learned over doing it. Now it's kind of became an essential part to where my most dedicated fans are watching me make this music live. And so I'm getting live feedback about the song like as I'm making it rather than put out a song when it's too late and then they're like, "Oh, I don't like this part."
Oh wow. So you're really like listening to their feedback as well and making adjustments along the way. And
Yeah,
oh
for
fuck
sure.
yeah, dude.
Like
That's so
literally
cool.
in that moment they're telling me. I mean, even they named my next DXD song that's coming out, you know?
Dude, I really appreciate that tip. Really appreciate you saying that because I'm in the process of wanting to build out a whole course. So I'm going to record video modules and PDFs and exercises and take everything I've learned from, life coaching and working in the music industry, which is a lot of shit. And in my head, I think I know what should go in it, but I'm also really considering like I should probably build this with other people being a part of it and getting feedback so I actually know what people want and so you saying that really confirms that I get to incorporate and ask my audience a lot more rather than just trying to do it all on my own. So thank you for that.
Definitely. I mean, it's the most important thing is and that you worry about is how are people gonna react to this? Are people gonna like this? Are people gonna like this? Well, if literally in the moment of creating it, you realize that 90% of the people in there are like, yeah, I'm not really feeling that. Then you
Yeah.
just change it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I've just done a lot of different ways to monetize. Like I switched from Twitch to then rotated everything onto a Discord server that's monetized on there for behind the scenes content, live streams, all that sort of stuff.
So how does that work? Do they pay like a monthly fee or something to have access to the Discord server?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's public side and then also the paid side. And so I still do public streams and everything, but all the if I edit a video for like if say I do vocals off stream, then I put them up as a behind the scenes video and still get people's opinions and stuff, but yeah, it's you have to figure out other ways to monetize. Patreon's a big thing that people try to do, but my thought is also that I want to be on a platform that a lot of people are using consistently so that there's actual like interaction. Patreon
Yeah.
doesn't have that sort of actual interaction. People want to get on there, and most of the people that are paying, like they want to see the behind the scenes content and whatnot, but they more so just want to support me. That, and then also with my new label Fixed, we're really pushing a lot of merchandise more than I ever did before because the Browning toured so much pre-COVID that like I didn't care about an online store. I'm like, honestly, I'm not worried about it. We're doing 5 shows or 5 tours this year in the States. Like people can come buy a shirt at the show, you know?
Yeah.
But now with how everything is, definitely online merch focus is a huge thing for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm definitely gonna buy one because I saw your merch line. It's sick as fuck. It's very like, I'm a metalhead. It's my style. If you look at how I've decorated my apartment, it's like skateboards and skulls and monsters and cool shit. And I'm just like, hell yeah. So I'm gonna buy something. I definitely wanna, not only support, but just I wanna rock it because it's definitely my style. I'm curious about the brand, right? You've done a really great job of building the brand. One thing that I see a lot of people come up against is like, how do I find the right designer? How do I find the right photographer? I have all these ideas. Obviously, one, it's going to take some money to invest, but also, how do you even find the right people to start working with in the first place? So, how have you gone about finding the creative collaborators to really make your brand come to life, to make a merch line for you? I'm assuming you're not designing all that shit yourself.
yeah, not the big like hand drawn type stuff. Like I do a
Yeah.
lot of like a lot of the social posts you'll see is me doing that sort of stuff, but I'm not doing
Yeah.
like this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
how do you get connected with dope artists to collaborate with?
So this is actually a big struggle for me for a long time. Because actually pre-COVID, like I was 100% solely music based. That's all I made my music on for my entire life. Whenever COVID hit and shut down the music industry, I actually started a business that is more product based rather than being just entertainment based. It's hard to make money in entertainment. You have to work extremely difficult. Like same with products, but it's a little easier just to say, here's the thing, and they hand you money, you know?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I did start a company that allowed me to finally have enough money to properly invest into like the art and the design and all that sort of stuff. That's actually a big tip I would give a lot of people is don't quit your day job, you know?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I never had a day job to begin with. I started touring when I was 18. So I never knew what it was like to have money to invest into my thing until
Yeah.
I started this company.
Yeah, you're always just kinda surviving month to month, like, "All right,
Yeah,
I'm
making
I'm
it
I'm
happen.
doing it, I'm doing
Yeah.
it," but, like, having that surplus, having that extra money to actually
Yeah.
invest into your business makes a big difference.
Oh, for sure. And so that's
Yeah,
something that I've more recently figured out is like I wish I had some source of money besides music before this.
yeah,
But yeah, so for the designs and stuff, and especially in the modern side of the Browning with the all the merch being super sick and everything, I found pretty much all the artists that are doing a lot of the stuff just straight up on Instagram. There are so many artists on there that are just like you as a musician. They're trying to put their crap out there and make it as an artist, as a designer. And so, whereas you would have thought, a shirt design like this would be kind of unobtainable, you find this dude and he's out there doing designs like this every single day for like $120 a pop, you know?
hell yeah.
Like, that's pretty affordable in the sense of getting this full, like, drawn thing, and then having that extra income has made me be able to, no questions asked, like, do a run of shirts that are 100 to $200 a piece, have to have in the front $500, $600 on artwork to then turn around and, sell it for what you need, but first, before you can invest that much, you gotta make sure that there's actually a desire for it, because the amount of times the Browning throughout her career posted up a shirt design, I was like, "Dang, who wants this?" And 500 people are like, "Yeah, I'd buy that," and then you sell 3 of the shirts, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, do you use, there's some services out there where it's like they print
Print on
per like, you
demand.
take the print on demand, you make the order
Yeah,
first, and then you have it print. Have you
exactly.
switched to that model now? Do you do that
Yeah,
now?
so that's what the
Yeah,
Browning does now. Our
yeah,
record label handles all of our merch, and they do it's called DTG, Direct to Garment, and so they have one of the best DTGs I've ever seen. You can get some really crap ones out there, but
yeah,
there are good ones, like even, a dude that was filling in on guitar for us for a while, he has a small project that he's doing as well that's just they're growing. They have really good online numbers, but they're rotating people into monetization, and so I pushed him straight up to, like, Teespring, which is, like, the most basic one of those things that you can do, the direct to garment things, and it's been working out really good for them.
yeah.
Because especially early on in an artist's career, if you just simplify your designs to where they work good with any sort of printing format, then it's gonna turn out just fine. Whereas if
Yeah.
you try to use a lesser printing format, which direct to garment is typically lesser quality with an insane design, then it's going to come out crappy. So kind
Yeah.
of work with what your limitations are. Like if you're going to do direct to garment on Teespring because you don't have no upfront cost, then just
Yeah.
simplify your designs to make sure that it looks good.
Yeah. Great tip. So you guys obviously have a higher end direct to garment service that you're using for
Yeah.
having these like metal shirts that have all the crazy designs and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it honestly surprised me because it's hard to find that sort of stuff. And the label that I'm working with, I was really against it initially when they mentioned it and they sent me a sample and I was like, okay, yeah, whatever company they use, I think it's more of a private company rather than a public one that is like Teespring or something.
I was gonna
They do.
ask what's the company? Let's go. Let's
Yeah.
put it out there. Yeah.
I know, right?
The secret. You guys gotta not gonna know. But that's great. You know, I literally was just yesterday having a conversation with somebody because I've been doing some little kind of one-off like branding consulting sessions with people.
Yeah.
If anybody's interested in building your brand and you need help, hit me up. I got you. Doing a lot of fun stuff with that. But that's something I come up against a lot is like when people are designing their logos and they're putting all these like gradients and little barbed wire and little like things in it. I'm like, hey, like this is cool, but it's not going to show up when you get it printed, or especially if you think like you're going to get it maybe embroidered on a hat, like it's not going to show up at all. Right. So you got to be, you know, kind of careful with how wild you get with some of those designs.
Definitely. And just as far as stylistically with the Browning, I was kind of if you go look at the Browning stuff, like you said, there's a lot of monsters, it's a lot of color, it's big, you know, big designs, big artwork. And that kind of comes into partial because of the band named as well. There's some bands that if you have the right name, you can just put your name on the t-shirt and it's sold, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's cool. It's cool sounding. Like the band Suicide Silence, they could probably just put their name and their logo on a t-shirt forever and make bank.
Yep.
I can't just put the Browning on a t-shirt and have it sell, you know? That's not a cool enough term or word for people to be like, dang, like I want to wear that, you know? So I even experimented over the years of we have a big part of our logo is just the B, the capital B. So I would do a big, huge design, and then I would do like the B in the corner, almost like a tag, you know?
Yeah.
To where the name isn't even on the shirt, but people know that it's a Browning.
And I talk about that a lot actually, is that you should aim to make stuff that even people that don't know who you are would wear it. Right.
Exactly.
Like if I didn't know the Browning, like I'm a fan of the music now, but even before I think I saw the shirt before I even listened to the music, and I was like, I'm gonna buy that shirt. I don't even know if this band is good, but I'm gonna buy that shirt because ultimately what it is it's representing more like who I am and what I stand for. And like I'm a fun, weird, wild person. I like to wear fun, weird, wild shit. I'm a metalhead. I like to show off that like this is my vibe. This is my aesthetic. When you see me walking around with a metal shirt with cut off sleeves and it's like, oh, this guy is like, you get the impression of that. And it's just an authentic representation of who I am. Someone who's done that really, really well in the EDM space that I'm just such a massive fan of. Another really great episode to go check out from the Headliner Mindset podcast is Bijou. And he has this really awesome, very simple, you know, high quality shirt that he put out. And he just on the front left chest, it has his logo, just nice and small, Bijou, which like, if you don't know Bijou, you would not buy a Bijou shirt that has a Bijou logo on it. It's like, it's kind of a weird name. Who the fuck is this guy? Like, why would you represent that unless you're a hardcore fan? But on the back, it says less internet, more music.
There you go.
That's a message that I believe in. That's a message that I want to represent, that I want to promote. So fuck yeah, I would buy that shirt, right? So when you're making merch, think about how can I make something that even if someone doesn't even know who I am, they would buy this and they would rep this because either it looks cool or it has like a really cool message on it that I want to promote.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And you got that a lot more before whenever stores like Hot Topic or whatever actually carried band merch. You know, the whole thing, if you see someone wearing the band shirt, you say, name 3 songs, you know?
Yeah.
Because like and it doesn't matter if they know the song or not because it looks good. And that's why they bought it. And so, yeah, with the Browning, I came to, there's a lot of times that you have to just accept certain like things that, I don't know, not necessarily like downsides to you as an artist, but figure out the things that are actually can be an issue and try to work it out to where it's not an issue anymore. So we have a weird name. So you know what? I make the weird name not the focus of the merchandise a lot of times. You know, I do these big crazy designs It doesn't matter what the name is. And that's actually a big focus with the DXD with my project with my wife is that the name is cool itself. So just seeing it on a shirt is cool, but also the name was done in a way to have a good emblem. So, and I'm even calling it DXD. Like I've called it DXD more than I've called it Death X Destiny or Death and Destiny. And so the whole point of it and the name itself was to have a recognizable emblem to where we could just have the pocket shirt or we
Yeah.
can do like simple streetwear designs that those aren't stuff I can do at the Browning. And so it was a big focus for the other project to have different style of merchandise to be able to push.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's if you can have, if you can have a cool name and a cool design and a cool brand and you can knock all of those out of the park, hell yeah. And back to what you said earlier, the name really is the least important part because there are so many examples of artists that we can point out where the name is kind of weird, but what they've done with it is incredible. I always use Deadmau5 as a reference. Like if you actually just look at the name and even how it's spelled, Deadmau5 is what everybody called him when he first came out. Like the words Deadmau5 is kind of a weird thing, but holy shit, look what he did with it. He built an epic brand around
Yep.
it. So, for anyone that's caught up on trying to find the perfect name, like don't worry so much about the name. Of course, there is some truth to it can limit you, right? Like maybe promoters, if you have like a name that's really offensive, you might get kind of blacklisted from certain promoters wanting to put you on the bill. Make sure, it's not crazy, but also don't be so hung up on it. It's really about what you do with it, the brand that you make around it.
Yeah, the music is more important than the name itself, and then just not only the music, but like what it's accompanied with for sure. And so I've learned to make the Browning work in a way that it's not like no one questions it in that way.
Yeah.
People still make jokes about it, but also online I've just kind of embraced that too,
Yeah. Another really cool name is Burn This World.
Right.
That's fucking rad. And so that's the name. That's rad. That's the name of your podcast.
Right.
So tell me about the podcast. Like, when did you get that started and what was your whole goal and vision and intention behind it?
Right. So the initial start of the Burn This World podcast was I actually was initially putting it out just specifically to do like the Browning lore. And Burn This World was the Browning's first album, and there's nothing else that uses that term Burn This World besides that first Browning album. So it's kind of synonymous with the Browning is the Burn This World Browning or branding. And so I was just the first like 15 episodes I did was me talking about the meaning of songs, right? And so I wanted to kind of deep dive songs or like my songwriting process about certain songs. And so that was my initial thought, but then I just couldn't help myself and just started, bringing friends on and talking to people and all that sort of stuff. And then there was the whole conversation again of like, is this branded properly? Because I initially branded it to brand it towards me specifically, but then it was me talking to everybody. But essentially, it's a metal podcast. I'm talking about metal with a bunch of metal dudes, and it's just a very metal phrasing, And so
it is.
yeah, super metal phrasing, and even my thought with it was the cover photo on not Instagram, on Spotify is me screaming into the mic with the Burn This logo below it that's like a metal font and everything. So someone looking at that with the words Burn This World and a picture of someone screaming into the mic, they're like, oh, that's definitely about metal,
I love how instantly recognizable metal is. It's like
Right.
there's the font style, the metal font where you're like, oh, that is like the Batman symbol for metalheads.
Exactly. Yeah, and so that was the whole thing. I just like, it's a podcast about metal, so the name is super metal, the logo's metal, a picture of someone screaming is metal, and so everything about it, if you're just browsing through podcasts on Spotify for some reason, you see that, it's again something that stands out from the rest of the artwork or rest of the podcast artwork that you're going to see, or even names, because it went in my head, do I call it the Johnny McBee Show? But if you saw the Johnny McBee Show, you wouldn't think, oh, that's definitely like all about metal,
Hella metal, yeah.
Exactly. So it just made sense to keep it as that to make it, concise with the brand.
Yeah. How many episodes have you done now?
I'm at like 75 or 76, something like that. And There's a period. Any sort of creative knows how this stuff goes. There's a period where I stopped for a little bit to focus on a whole bunch of other stuff. And one reason I think that the Browning does decently well with a lot of these releases is I go through these phases of a little bit of scarcity. I can't be on the internet all the time. I can't stand like being on the internet all the time. So I go through these spurts where I don't say freaking crap online for 5 months,
Mm.
don't say anything.
Oh
And
wow.
so every time the Browning puts out music, there's people be like, "Oh, they're back," like thinking that it broke up or something. But it's just
Oh,
I wasn't posting on Instagram every day. That's all that was
I
happening.
see. You starve the market a little bit.
Exactly. And so every time you come back, people are like rehyped. And so it was the same thing with the podcast. And I took like I think it was like 6 months off the podcast, and the first episode I uploaded back had these exact same amount of views. Like, and
Yeah.
then now they're even more. And so it's I think there is something to be said about a little bit of scarcity at times. Give people like you won't know what you have until you miss it, you know?
Mm. Yeah,
Whenever
yeah.
you kind of people get in this routine of listening to your thing, and then they're like, "Dang, I really missed that podcast," and then they get back on.
Damn. All right. Well, okay, headliner mindset fans, I'll see you all in
See ya.
6 months. Or if this is the last episode you're gonna hear.
There you
No,
go.
I'm just kidding. I'm really loving this. I've been doing them every single Monday for almost 6 months now. So
There you go.
I'm very pumped. I will take that into consideration. Maybe we'll take a break. I would like to know, just as another podcaster, what tips do you have for me that might help this thing grow and reach more people? How have you built yours?
So the big thing for me has been consistency is good. It's important. That kind of counteracts what I just said, but it is important to be consistent.
Yeah.
Just because people are very routined, but I knew that my relaunch of the podcast was going to be with me announcing this big stuff for the Browning, a new label signing, a new all this sort of stuff. And so I was actually waiting to relaunch the podcast till I had all these huge things to talk about to ramp everyone back into it.
Yeah.
So I had a strategy with the scarcity. I didn't just like go off and then upload another random episode. It was like
Yeah.
strategic to a degree. And so consistency is very important because people are going to get on every Monday and be like, this is what I listen to when I drive to work on Monday. I do it with podcasts every weekend. I drive to trade shows every single weekend, and I have the ones I listen to. But then as far as like growth outside of just consistency, because I would say podcast is even harder to get attention than music is, for
Yeah.
sure. It's flooded, and there's a lot of people like trying to do certain things. But my thing is the way that you're doing this and the way that I do it as well. It's a little more informative rather than just like two musicians that are talking about, I don't know what, Pokemon or something.
Yeah,
And
random
so
shit. Yeah.
yeah, and so being very focused and having like a direct market, and this kind of goes back to the music as well. Like
Yeah.
having a direct corner of the market that you are the one doing it, I think is very important to do that. And then I wasn't scared to reach out to you and try to get on this, just
That's
like
true.
I wasn't scared to hit up the biggest artists that I know and say, "Hey, come get on this podcast."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's just kind of like just knowing that like the worst that can happen is someone that says no, and that's not that big of a deal. And it's not a
Totally.
personal attack if someone says no. It's just I don't really feel like it, or whatever. And so trying to reach out and it goes the same thing with music. If there's a manager you really want to work with, or a band you really want to collab with, or a label that you want to work with, just freaking reach out to them. The worst thing that happens is you just have to reach out to them again 6 months later.
Yeah, you got nothing to lose, man. And I'm
Yeah.
so glad, for one, I'm so glad that you reached out to me and that we could create this conversation. It's very
Yeah.
cool that you did. And I've talked about that before, but just to really reiterate, shoot your fucking shot,
Uh-huh.
right? Like
100%.
my entire career was based off of these milestone moments of where I just shot my shot. I just walked up to somebody and
Yep.
shook their hand, or I just sent like a cold email. I sent a cold DM. You'd be surprised at how accessible people are. There's been
Yeah.
these moments where I'm like, I have a 1 in 1,000 chance of this person replying, and then they got back to me like an hour later.
For
It's
sure.
like it's insane. You never know you never know what's possible until you get out there and try it. And yeah, like you said, you really have nothing to lose. So that's a great, really, really great tip.
I mean, even like me getting inspired to do music full time, I was doing the Browning as a solo project on MySpace and putting stuff online, but I was planning on working in a studio. I wasn't planning on being like a full-time musician, but this band back in 2008 was having open auditions online. They're a band called as Blood Earns Black. They're one of the biggest bands in deathcore and metalcore.
Yeah, dude, I know
And
them.
yeah, they were doing open auditions. I threw one out there. I was 18 years old and they actually took it and I joined that
Holy
band and
shit, you're
yeah.
in that. I've
Mhm.
definitely, like, listened to your music then for sure.
And so
That's so
they
sick.
brought me on the road as the first tours that I ever did. I was 18, 19 years old when I was with them, and
Dude,
there's no way that I should have ever had been able to do that or that I should have even been confident enough that I could have. I just
yeah,
did it. I just went for
yeah.
it, made it happen.
And what's cool is when you do it, you start to change the wiring in your brain and you start to look at yourself differently and you start to believe about what's possible differently because you're like,
Yeah.
"Wait a minute, that worked." And so
Yeah.
next time you're like a little bit more likely to just go for it again,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
Because oftentimes in the beginning we just have a lot of fear of like, "Oh my god, what if I fail? What if I get rejected? What if I whatever?"
Yeah.
And so we don't do it, but as you start to do it and you start to kind of get some wins under your belt, you're like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. That everything really in your brain starts to shift. And then pretty soon you don't even hesitate. You don't even think twice. It just becomes part of how you
Yeah.
operate.
For sure, and I mean, even leaving that band and starting the Browning full time, I that was another big kinda gamble, but, just fully committing to it and, being confident at that point that, like, well, clearly I've am capable of this, and so just really going out there and giving it all and not being afraid to lose potentially. And the music industry in general, it's like, it's going against you in a lot of ways. You guys can Google certain things about the Browning and about me that you can see that I have not had the best, workings with record labels, okay? There's
Mm,
a bunch of stuff out there, and so you have to not be afraid to lose because music is about, like, micro wins. Like, even
yeah.
if you're not talking about being on the sense of, like, being signed to a label at that level, but even on a personal level, like, if your win for this next release is to reach out and get it on 5 different playlists, that's a win, and you have to do that 500 times, Like, you have to do it
Yeah.
for every release, and every time it's just as substantial as the last, and even if it's just, "Okay, this release, I'm gonna try to put out a really good merch drop and sell a couple items," like, don't don't think that the only way you win is by getting signed and playing in front of 10,000 people. Because that's not how the Browning has gotten to where it is. The Browning's gotten to where it is because we played a freaking 1,000 shows to, 10 people in rooms, lived in a van for a decade. Like we won by that.
Yeah. And it's so important to understand that failure and challenge is part of the process that
Yeah,
like it's not a matter of if you fail or if you get hurt, if you experience some pain along the way, like
yeah,
it comes with the fucking territory. This is about going off the beaten path and getting off the normal road that everybody else is taking and paving your own path into the unknown. And so with that naturally is going to come a lot of uncertainty and a lot of challenge. So it's just like accept that. And then when it happens, it's not like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this happened." It's like, "No, you're gonna have managers that you get in fights with and that you drop. You're gonna have shit that happens with record labels. You're gonna have releases that flop. You're gonna have fucking destroyed relationships. You're gonna have heart." It's part of life. This is life. Life is not a smooth sailing, merry-go-round. It's a fucking roller coaster. It's an adventure. It's wild. So just be down for it, right? It comes with the territory. And if you're adventurous and you really want to like be on this journey, then this is the path for you for sure.
definitely. And I actually just submitted a resume to a company the other day I'm trying to work like with on music with. And they're a company you have to actually submit resumes for. And on whenever I got to the part of my resume that said education, what I wrote was hands-on experience with lots of failure and success.
Yes,
That's
sir. The
literally what
best,
my
man.
that's what my
Education from
education
the streets, bro. That's
100%.
street smarts right there, man. I love that, bro. I love that. Well, dude, I am so grateful that you reached out. I'm so happy that I also said yes and that we could create this conversation, have this conversation. I'm such a fan of what you're doing. I'm very excited to go order some merch and to go represent the Browning out here
Heck yeah.
in Austin, Texas. and just a huge fan of what you're up to, man. So thanks so much for taking the time to hop on today.
Yeah, of course. And we're playing Austin, Texas, December 2nd, headlining a festival. So
Let's go,
we'll
bro.
see you
It's
there.
going on the calendar. I will 100% see you there. Fuck
Heck yeah.
yeah.